Hey guys, my name is Colson Rosa, and welcome back to Seraphim Stories. So today let's talk about setting. Now, as an author of both sci-fi and medieval fantasy novels, you might think that I have setting perfectly handled. I have it all covered, and that's something that I'm a master at. But I definitely admit that I still have more to learn, as I do with all of these topics. And I want to continue to grow along with you guys as I explore the world of creative writing. That being said, I think setting is incredibly fun to work at. I think getting to develop your own world is incredibly interesting, and using your creativity to its limits, pushing it to its max, is a great challenge when tackling something that large in scope as a fantasy or as a sci-fi, where often you have to take an entire world from scratch and make it seem plausible, make it seem like a fully thought through and fleshed out idea. And there's so much more to Amchronos that I haven't even been able to share throughout the books. For those of you that haven't read the entire series, actually at the end of the March on Balion, which is the fifth and final book in the series, I include a section in the author's note where I talk through a lot of my different ideas and concepts for a much broader sense of the world of Amchronos. But even that doesn't include all of the world building and lore that I've had the honor and the fun of getting to do. It wasn't just a challenge. It was taking so many different parts of the map and filling in their great story. And there's so much more that I'd love to tell you guys about that someday, about kind of the hidden background, history, and lore of this incredible world. And that being said, setting doesn't have to be an entirely new situation or planet that you come up with all on your own. Setting in its most simple terms can be any time and place. You need to have both time and place in mind, because you could look at a country like England or Great Britain, and the changes that it's made throughout history are startling. So you need to know both where the story is taking place and have at least a general idea of both the location and the timeline. Because if you don't know the specific area the story takes place in, at least on a basic level, you could get lost into putting a lot of inaccuracies into your story. Like, if you say the story takes place in Queens and everything you're writing about in the story is from Brooklyn, someone who's a citizen of New York might recognize that and call you out on it. Or if you set the story in 200 AD when really it should be 2000 AD, that's a massive issue that needs to be adjusted. And setting can be grand or simple. It can be as simple as someone's house or someone's backyard, or as grand as on the scale of multiple galaxies like Star Trek. But either way, usually there's a progression in the setting so that you're not stuck in one place for the entire film or novel. Now, there can be exceptions to this. There can be comedies that can almost entirely take place in one area. Or there's even some stories that focus on law and the legal realm that take place almost specifically in the courtroom and yet are still quite interesting. But that's very hard to pull off. Your setting usually needs to change depending on the scene. So there's the overarching period, the overarching location and time period. But there's also the setting of specific scenes, almost like a drama show that then, even though they're all taking place on one stage, they then go to different locations as the sets are brought in. Don't assume that your audience knows everything they need to about the setting. It's your job as the author to inform them about the setting, because not everyone automatically is going to relate to that setting and understand it. Even if it's something as iconic as the pyramids or the Taj Mahal or Big Ben or the Golden Gate Bridge, then you still need to take the time to build around that setting. Show us what the characters see. Show us the world that they're living in and the places that they need to go. Include enough detail that these places feel full and alive, and make sure that you're not selling short what that setting has to offer. But you don't always have to go into details of every brick and street and lamp and sidewalk. You don't have to go into that level of specifics. You can talk about the entire scene in more large sweeping words that talk about the general perspective on the entire area, or point out a couple specific details that really set the mood for what the entire place is then like. Different writers have different styles, so you can level out your style compared to someone else's. So the first question I want to answer about setting is the debate of fantastical versus realistic. If your world is fictional, it's one that doesn't exist in the real world, it needs to be developed with certain characteristics and laws that set it apart. To some extent, it needs to have a culture, it needs to have a society with ways things work, and you don't want to break what you've established or the way that things work in this world. You want to stay true to what you've set in the buildup. If it's realistic, it needs to be true to the actual location as much as you can be. At the same point in time, it also needs to be expounded upon so that you don't just mention the bare bones and move on with the story and never mention anything else about the specific scenes and where they're taking place. People need to know, to have a mental image, what the perspective is from the characters on a lot of the different places that they're going, and at least highlights of major important noticeable features. And you can go into greater detail than if you want to on more specific features. Another factor to setting is whether it should be crucial or contributing. In some stories, the setting is what is fought over or for. In some tales, without the setting, they wouldn't be the same tale at all. It's the land that's being fought over. It's the place that is loved so deeply that it can't be left. In other stories, it's a little bit less central to the longings and the very nature of the characters and the plot. Either way, though, setting needs to add depth to the story. It's more than just the time and the place that something is happening. It's the entire framework around which the characters and the action and the dialogue are built upon. And you can talk about how the characters love or hate the setting that they're in, or maybe have a myriad of mixed emotions toward it. Really develop those and sink your teeth into how different people can even have unique perspectives on the same exact location, the same exact time period. Some people just feel they were born in the wrong century, and some people just feel they wish they could live somewhere else on planet Earth. And the plot will then affect the setting for better or for worse. The plot could make the setting more safe or more dangerous, more interesting or more dull, more battle-scarred or more healed. And that's something that's really interesting, is to look at the setting from the start to the end. Now, the setting doesn't always need to grow or change. The setting can remain the same. But sometimes in stories, even the setting takes a hit to its characteristics when it then faces change because of the actions of the storyline. And rebuilding might need to take place. Even if someone wins their particular battle or struggle, the damages done to the setting might need to get repaired. Or vice versa, maybe the characters whether knowing it or not even realizing it, have improved the setting, made it somewhere people would much rather live than before. And that is one of the excellent things about setting, is it's a bit more of a gentleman as far as the amount of importance it needs to play. If you want the setting to be what is fought over, what is shown so much precision and detail and attention, you can do exactly that. But at the same point in time, the setting does not have to be the centerpiece. In something like a drama, where you're focused on the lives of the characters and the emotional weight they're feeling with other characters, where the dialogue is just riveting, cutting to the heart, showing philosophies and worldviews of life that are hard to forget and make the debates that they have so much more real, the setting can take a bit of a back seat. And it's okay to do that. But what your setting does need to do is it needs to immerse the reader in the story. Make the story have legs. Make it have sort of that backbone, foundation that you can almost see as you're seeing the action. Your reader develops a mental picture of how everything looks in the background around it. Setting holds all those things up. Setting holds while the character is jumping off skyscraper buildings, what does the skyline look like? I think even of Into the Spider-Verse, and how they did such a great job showing this cool comic book type setting that also was both very epic at times, but also breaking apart at the seams as the fabric of their universe and their dimension was torn into. I think that setting also needs to uplift the plot and the characters. So you can think through, how does setting help the plot move along? Maybe this type of storyline wouldn't work in a different setting. The type of storyline that follows the Spartans on their adventures wouldn't work in a modern age, or wouldn't work in a much earlier age before the Spartans, or in a different part of the world. Might not have the same impact or emotional stakes or truth to history. And it also needs to uplift the characters. Both the plot and the characters are going to have their input on the setting that they're in. They're going to have their thoughts and their feelings about it. They're going to affect it for better or for worse. And your characters, they're going to talk about the setting. That's something very natural for people to do. But they're also going to have a lot of strong feelings toward the life that they've been handed. The life that they've been given is very affected by the setting in which they are placed. Even the setting of the poor pauper's home compared to the rich man's palace. The king's mansion compared to the hut in the swamps. Those type of places will have natural impact on your characters, the way they talk, the way they think, the way they act, their worldview, their perspective on so many different things like their job, their money, their relationships, their marriages, their families. All of these things get nuances and detailed layers when you have an incredible setting. So I want to thank you guys so much for getting to learn more about setting, and I hope that your settings are, whether fantastical or realistic, crucial or contributing, always made to be so much more than just a surface level coat of New York 1973. There's so much more you can do. And I think it's incredibly rewarding to see that your story has a place in which it can thrive, a time in which it can thrive. And I also just want to thank you guys for the great support you've been giving me. And if you would consider subscribing to this channel, maybe leaving a like or a comment, that would help me out a lot to know what you guys are looking for in these videos. What you guys think about setting. Maybe even mention what are some of your favorite settings in pop culture. I would love to hear about those. And I hope you guys love the video, and I hope you have a great day.